Okay, good evening. Welcome to our opening share. Our goal in general is you shouldn't perceive this as our beginning Mesachos Brachos. We're beginning Shas. It's our project. We're going to, God willing, go through Shas together. It could take a little while, especially because it's going to be somewhat slower than a Daf Yomi pace. And we're not going to rush through. We'll try to take our time and talk about some things, if that's okay. So it may take us a little while. We may have to ramp up the pace at some point, but God willing, we should all be privileged to finish Shas together. And as the Chinese say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So we begin with page 1, except that we don't have a page 1, because the Talmud begins on page 2. That's already an accomplishment. We begin on page 2. And in general, I think we'll probably go for about 45 minutes. We can go for the line of 45 usually on the average. Sound reasonable for Thursday night? Okay, so the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, the Talmud, starts with a mitzvah of Kriya Shema, the opening topic. And Brachot as a whole talks about a few other things. It talks about davening, as one would expect. That's the middle part of the Masechta. It talks about brachos, as in what brachos to make on food, and brachos to make on special occasions, things like that. Those are the last third of the Masechta. But the opening third, and the first topic essentially in the Talmud, is the topic of Kriya Shema. The mitzvah of Kriya Shema is the opening theme in the oral Torah, and some discussion as to why that is. Why did Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbeinu Ravashi, those who set up the Talmud, why was it set up that way that Kriya Shema would be the opening topic? So the Rambam writes in his Perush HaMishnayos that it's in order to make the point that Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. We should know that if we're going to start this endeavor of looking into wisdom, so the first thing is Yiras Hashem, that we acknowledge God's sovereignty and our reverence for God. So Kriya Shema, of course, is like the Jewish Pledge of Allegiance, and that's the opening topic that shows what we're focused on as we seek to pursue Chachma as a Om. The Tzlach, the author of the Note of Yehuda, the great Achronim, a posek from Prague, is known for a few other svarim as well. So he has a sefer on Shas called Etz Chaim of Teaneck, which he named after his mother, who was Chaya. And his commentary on Brachos is very often quoted. So he talks also about why this is, why the Torah Sheba'al Peh starts off with Kriya Shema. He has a few other reasons. He says maybe we'll get the wrong idea. We start off with Torah Sheba'al Peh, so it's already two Torahs. We have Torah Sheba'al and Torah Sheba'al Peh. So maybe they're two gods too. So okay, we have to start off with the Kriya Shema to remind us that no, there's one God who gave us two Torahs, and it's all one integrated system. We shouldn't get the wrong idea just because there are two Torahs. We shouldn't think that there are two gods. He also points out that this way it kind of mimics the structure of the Aseres HaDibros. The Aseres HaDibros are kind of representative of Torah Sheba'al, and they start with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So then Torah Sheba'al Peh should start with Kriya Shema, which is essentially the same theme. Another point. He also notes, a little bit humorous, that in Kriya Shema, so Kriya Shema, as we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but it's one of the primary sources for the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It tells us, V'shinantam uvanecha, and we should talk about learning all day and all night. So if all there was Torah Sheba'al, so that would take us a little while, but it wouldn't be so labor-intensive that it would justify what we read in Kriya Shema. So in order that we should understand that what's represented in Kriya Shema is a much longer endeavor, so that brings us into the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which makes it a little bit more understandable why it's such a time-intensive type of program. So with all of that, Kriya Shema becomes the first topic. Kriya Shema, we generally assume Kriya Shema is a mitzvah min Torah. That's how we assume lahalacha, but it's not such a simple point. Just that fact that Kriya Shema is min Torah is not necessarily such an obvious point to everyone. It was actually debated in the Talmud. God willing, we'll get there in the third parak of Brachos. There was an opinion that Kriya Shema is not a biblical obligation, but it's a rabbinical obligation. In general, when we talk about whether something is a mitzvah min Torah or not, so it makes a difference for a couple of things. Mitzvahs min Torah, mitzvahs midrabanan, so we have to do them both, so it shouldn't really matter. So one difference it makes in a situation where you're not sure. Right? You're not sure if you did it or not, so do we obligate you to do it again? It's called Sveika Daraisa L'Chumra. So there's a discussion later on in the Gemara. If you're not sure if you said Kriya Shema, you have to say it again. The assumption being that the relevant issue is Kriya Shema a mitzvah min haTorah? So one of the opinions says no. But almost all the Rishonim assume yes, that when the Torah tells us v'dibarta bam, that means that we should recite the words of Kriya Shema every morning and every night, and that's a mitzvah min haTorah. But there were actually a handful of Rishonim. There's a few scattered Tosas and Menachos and Tosas and Sotim. There's a few scattered opinions that maintain that Kriya Shema is not really an obligation in Min HaTorah. As later Sfarim explain, that when those opinions take that position, so what do they assume is going on? They assume that there is a mitzvah to say something. There's a mitzvah to recite some psukim in the morning and in the evening, but it wouldn't necessarily have been the psukim of Kriya Shema. And the rabbis came and said it should be the psukim of Kriya Shema. In general, it's a little bit of a complex issue because there's something being referenced there. It says v'dibarta bam, we should talk about something in the morning and in the evening. So the truth is, the other candidate is that this is the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So if we assume that Kriya Shema is min haTorah, so we assume those psukim are not referring to Torah study, it's referring specifically to Kriya Shema. So that's an interesting debate in general. There's a comment the Or Sameach has, which maybe we shouldn't say on tape, we shouldn't tell the Shiva guys this, but the Gemara says elsewhere that v'dibarta bam, you should talk about them. So that means you shouldn't talk about things other than Torah, you shouldn't talk about Dvarim B'Telim. V'dibarta bam v'lo b'Dvarim B'Telim. So the Or Sameach points out, Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk in his commentary to the Rambam, that it's very possible we don't follow that Gemara, because that Gemara is assuming that the v'dibarta bam is talking about Torah study. But we assume Kriya Shema is mitzvah min haTorah, which means v'dibarta bam is talking about Kriya Shema. So then it's not talking about Talmud Torah, so you don't necessarily have a source that you shouldn't talk about Dvarim B'Telim. So that's a separate discussion. But in any event, that's how we assume that Kriya Shema is a mitzvah min haTorah against a handful of Rishonim and one opinion in the Gemara that it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So what does that mean if it's a mitzvah min haTorah? That means the whole package that we have, everything, the 3 paragraphs and the brachos, so all of that, that's a mitzvah min haTorah? So no, that's another point of controversy. That's another issue that was debated. So there were some Rishonim, and as we go on, we'll see some of the proofs for the various positions and why some Rishonim take some positions and some Rishonim take other positions, that maintain that really, to say Kriya Shema is min haTorah, that means just the opening pasuk. That all the Torah asks us to do is to say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's it. Now we have also a din that when we say Shema, that pasuk of Shema, so we also say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus L'Olam V'Ad, that goes together with it. And that's a whole discussion in the Gemara in Pesachim where that came from. Are you familiar with the story that the Gemara says in Pesachim? The events that are alluded to in Parshas Vayechi, that when Yaakov was on his deathbed, so he met his grandsons, and he was afraid, he met the Ephraim and Menashe, and he was afraid that maybe they were not following his tradition. So they sensed this. The Gemara says he was going to reveal to them the future, and then he all of a sudden walked into the Kodesh, and he thought that maybe there was some problem with them. So they said to him, Shema Yisrael, listen, Yaakov Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we only have one God. As the Gemara says, Kishem She'ein B'libacha Le'echad, just like you only believe in one God, we're just like you, we also only believe in one God. So his reaction to that was, oh, good, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'Olam V'Ad. So the Gemara then says, we're not sure what to do with this pasuk, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus L'Olam V'Ad, that on the one hand, Moshe didn't say it. In the Chumash where it says, Shema, we don't have Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus L'Olam V'Ad. On the other hand, Yaakov did say it. So what should we do? So we compromise and we whisper. Now this is another thing that you really should not tell people in shul, so don't take this halacha l'maisa. But the same slach we mentioned a few minutes ago, so the slach says it must mean that whispering is not a hefsek. Because apparently the question of the Gemara is, how can we say Baruch Shem in the middle of Shema if it's not part of what Moshe says? So the Gemara says whisper it, so maybe that means it's not an interruption to whisper in the middle of davening. Do not take that halacha l'maisa. You shouldn't whisper or talk or anything. Whispering is better than talking, but it's worse than nothing. You shouldn't talk either in whisper or in loud voices during davening, but that seems to be the way that Slach understood that Gemara, that whispering Baruch Shem apparently makes it less of an offense against Moshe, that Moshe didn't say it, so we can whisper it. We whisper Baruch Shem. But the halacha l'maisa, we treat Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus L'Olam V'Ad with the same status as the first pasuk of Kriyas Shema. So whatever halachos apply to that one pasuk, to Shema Yisrael, that applies also to Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Lava. We always say them together. So some of the opinions hold that only that first pasuk is a mitzvah minat Torah. And we'll see if we get to the second parak, in the beginning of the second parak, there are some sentences that sound like that just the first sentence of Kriyas Shema is the real Torah obligation, and the rest was added on by the rabbis. Another opinion is very popular in the Rishonim. We'll see very soon that Rashi seems to lean that way in the Rashi that's coming up in the immediate few minutes, that the first paragraph is Minat Torah, which makes sense in a sense because the three paragraphs are not together in the Torah. So to say that there's one mitzvah in the Torah includes them all is already a little bit challenging. So some of the Rishonim say this first paragraph is Minat Torah. And Midrabanan, they added on the other two. Then the next opinion, you can probably guess where this is going, is the Pri Chodesh. The Pri Chodesh is the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. So in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, he has a long essay where he goes through everybody's opinion on this. He goes through a whole survey of what everyone maintains about how much of Kriyas Shema is Minat Torah and how much isn't. And he says that he thinks the opinion that makes the most sense is that the first two paragraphs are Minat Torah. Now both of them contain the phrase L'daber bam or V'dibarta bam, some form of that phrase. So both of them include their own inherent command to talk about them. So those first two paragraphs, that's Minat Torah. But the third paragraph, that really doesn't seem to fit into the pattern. That must be in addition Midrabanan. Now there is an opinion also, perhaps it's less popular, that all three paragraphs are Minat Torah. The Rambam sounds like that, although it's a little bit of a question how to read the Rambam. And Rav Soloveitchik has a whole essay about this where he observes, and there's strong indications to this way from the Rambam himself, that the third paragraph is Minat Torah, but not because the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. But the third paragraph fulfills another mitzvah, Minat Torah. What's that? The mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's also a obligation that applies during the same time periods, twice a day, and every night. So therefore, we do them together. So the third paragraph is a way of fulfilling that mitzvah which shares the same time zone. And as the Rav discusses in that shir, it's not just a convenience. It's not just that we have these two mitzvahs that have the same time zones, let's do them together, but that there's a shared theme. That this becomes, it's not just that we should have a mitzvah to remember Kriyas Shema, but that part of our mitzvah is Yetzias Mitzrayim, but that part of our Kriyas Shema experience, that we accept Malchus Shamayim, we accept God's sovereignty, together with the recognition that He took us out of Egypt, that's all a part of the experience. So these two mitzvahs are meant to be woven together in this way, and therefore we have this din of Kriyas Shema, of a three-paragraph Kriyas Shema, which is the end result, and possibly even all three paragraphs Minat Torah, but maybe because of the convergence of these two mitzvahs together. And all of that is packaged within Berchos Kriyas Shema. So what are Berchos Kriyas Shema? So Berchos Kriyas Shema is a whole discussion in the Rishonim also. It sounds like it means it's a bracha that we recite on Kriyas Shema. It's the Brachot HaMitzvah. Maybe there's an elaborate structure of brachos on this mitzvah. Many of the Rishonim, like the Rashba and others, didn't understand that way. They thought that these were not really brachos on Kriyas Shema. These are tfilos. These are the tfilos like the rest of davening that Chazal put into the davening. And they structured them around Kriyas Shema. So the phrase Berchos Kriyas Shema means the brachos that are associated with Kriyas Shema. Not brachos for Kriyas Shema, but they're a part of the package of Kriyas Shema. And they are essentially subject to the rules of davening.
Do we have excuse me, do we have other cases where you have a Brachot mitzvah that doesn't have the formula of a shekel shalom?
Possibly. So if you say like that, you probably have to say, it's an open question, first of all, whether Kriyas Shema is the kind of thing that should have a bracha. We have other types of things like that which may not have a bracha. But if they are brachos in that sense, so they're clearly accomplishing something else also. So it's something that's really coming from a different function and also maybe serve the purpose of the bracha. So too, like the Gemara is going to say later, it could also serve the bracha of Avarava, could also serve the purpose of Berchos HaTorah. So it seems more that it happens to accomplish a few things while also being a bracha. That might be one way to say it. Or it's just a tefillah that's there in that context. So whatever it is, it seems to be that the halacha treats these brachos as tefillah. So in terms of Zman, which is going to be the major opening topic, what the time limits are, the brachos really don't follow the rules of Kriyas Shema, they follow the rules of davening, the rules of Shachris, or the rules of Ma'ariv in both cases. And we'll see that'll be the Ma'ariv will be the